Actually, an article, the title is "Don't Squander Your Leads." Leads are hard enough to come by, we don't want to lose track of them. And this is basically a step-by-step guide to drip marketing. The second thing I wanted to mention is on the next page, page 13, is a worksheet that goes along with this presentation, which would normally be done as more of an interactive workshop, getting people engaged in some change management ideas. We don't have time for that today, so this is really a short course. This is the Cliff Notes of change management. This is based on a book by John Cotter, one of the better known authors on this topic. He's a Harvard Business School professor, organizational change and change leadership. Maybe a branding expert as well. He must have stayed up all night thinking of the name of this book. I've discovered that there are, as Patrick points out, two things Rotarians don't like. One of them is the way things are. I don't like my club, I don't like my president, I don't like the meals, I don't like the meeting place. But I've also learned the thing they really hate is when you change something. These are 6 of 8 principles that Cotter presents in the book. I'm going to blow through these really quickly. Some of you have seen this before, maybe the first time for some of you. The first is allowing too much complacency. Rotary's number one enemy, I believe, is not Kiwanis, it's complacency. Failing to create a sufficiently powerful guiding coalition. This is most common among inexperienced leaders who will step right into it. They'll come back from a district membership summit and go right back into their next board meeting and lay all these ideas out in front of the board and just get killed. Underestimating the power of vision. People are looking for vision. People are looking for vision, and it's up to a club leader, particularly a club president, to provide that. It's also up to a club membership chair to provide that in the context of here's why we need to stabilize or grow our club membership. Under communicating the vision. If there's just one thing I could explain to governors and clubs, and that is that whatever your communication plan is, whatever your plan as far as frequency and content is, just take that up by about a factor of 10, and you'll be almost close. Permitting obstacles to get in the way in Rotary is generally the elder naysayers, could be others, could be money, but it's usually pushback. And then failing to create short-term wins. Whenever you're trying to change something organizationally, you want to set up some easy targets for success. You want to set up some gimmies. You tell me, what are the consequences of failed change management efforts? Anybody?
People aren't,
Blockbuster.
I'm sorry?
Just look at Blockbuster.
Yeah?
people aren't willing to try again.
People are not willing to try again. That is perhaps the biggest downside of a failed change management effort, is it makes it very difficult to bring that idea back to the table. We tried that once. By the way, if you get that, here's an idea you can impart to your club leaders. And we hear it all the time, right? We tried that once. It didn't work. Okay? The best answer to that is, tell me more about that.
Yes.
Tell me more about that, because chances are what failed was it was a bad plan or bad implementation, probably not a bad idea.
Terry, the follow-up question to that is also, why do you think that happened?
Why do you think that happened? Yeah, exactly. Why do you think that happened? In another context, if somebody is simply struggling and having trouble getting their initiative through, just ask what's getting in the way. Doesn't make it anybody's fault, doesn't call on them to come up with a solution, just what's getting in the way. This is a lift from the book, and Cotter talks about the human condition being the majority of this source of complacency. But here's something we've got to guard against: happy talk from senior management. Happy talk from senior management. At home it sounds like this: Junior comes home with a terrible report card. Dad is just about ready to explain the consequences of that, which probably has something to do with the use of the car. And Mom steps up and says, "Oh, don't feel too bad about that, Junior. I understand that companies are looking for well-rounded C students." Just cuts it off at the knees. Our district membership chair, Ed Irick, had an experience with Happy Talk from senior management. Are you want to share that with Ed?
Yes, I went down to one of our clubs with Red Zone, Room GI, and they're down to 13 members and really struggling. And I thought, well, they asked for me to come out. And I thought, well, be a little transparent about it. I'll bring the AG down with me. So my failure was to let the AG know that this was not going to be Happy Talk. So every time I tried to give a little tough love with the club, he would say, oh, it's really not that bad. This is a good club. They're really trying hard. So it just kind of wasn't as effective as I thought it was going to be. So now I've got to go back.
Here's how Happy Talk from senior management sounds in the Rotary Club. Well, yeah, we lost a couple of years, a couple of members last year, but we still got a good solid core. So they told that story for 5 years, right?
This is the same club, though, that's going back to what we talked about yesterday. This club, the leadership, it's going to be a board meeting, the president-elect, and one other member who happened to own the office space where they were holding the meeting, showed up for this, and the president was not aware that her club had lost 8 members this year. They brought in 7, but they lost 8. And she said, I didn't realize we lost that many. They were totally focused on what they were going in and how they were going after that. Unbelievable. I couldn't believe that did happen back there.
And plus you're intentional, it's easy to see the great stuff when you've inducted new people, but, oh, so-and-so moved. You know, so the secretaries need to be sure to communicate that. So,
Humans have an incredible capacity for denial. And that's part of what you're up against when you get these, oh, everything's fine here sort of responses. And just low expectations. Shoot low, boys, they're riding Shetland ponies. You know? But finally, it's this kill the messenger, the bringer of bad news. Sometimes there is bad news. Sometimes you have to sit down with the club and say, I'm really concerned about your club. You've had a net loss of 2 members a year for each of the past 5 years. You're down 10 members from where you were only 5 years ago. Stop right there. Don't say but, and don't give them any excuses. It's just a fact. You didn't come there to pick on them. You didn't come there to make them feel bad. You came there to help them understand the reality of their situation. So, prescription number 1, establish a sense of urgency. Now, these are on your page 13. There's an antidote Cotter provides for each of these change management failures. Status quo is now acceptable future. If needed, create a crisis. Now, y'all have got your red zone page of your MGIs. In those clubs, you don't need to create a crisis. They've already got one. They simply need to be aware that they have a crisis. Guiding coalition. This is really important, and particularly with inexperienced leaders, people brand new to leadership. They may be getting their first leadership opportunity as president of the club. If they can surround themselves with 2 or 3 or 4 thought leaders, if they can surround themselves with a group of people that are willing to buy into a different point of view, all of a sudden it's a whole different conversation at the board meeting where they've asked somebody to chime in support of them rather than the elder naysayer who's almost always directly across the table from the person that's presenting the new idea. This vision thing is a big deal. You have on page 14 many examples of club visions. But here's one you can try on for size. This is Cotter's example. Our goal is to reduce mean time to repair parameters so they're perceptually lower than all major competitors inside the United States and out. In a similar vein, we have targeted new product development cycle times, order process times, and other customer relevant processes for change. Any of you from corporate or government lives? Sound familiar? How about, we're going to become faster than anyone in our industry at satisfying customer needs.
Bingo.
There you go. This is one of the, I get a chill every time I put this up. This is one of the vision quotes of all time. This is before a joint session of Congress. I believe this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. Now, Kennedy had a guiding coalition. At the time it was called the Jet Propulsion Lab, became NASA. He knew this could be done. In fact, it's a sophomore physics problem to figure out what it's going to take to propel somebody into orbit and then to the moon and back. It's a 10-year engineering project to get it done, but the physics are not that complicated. Or he could have said, our mission is to become the international leader in the space industry through maximum team-centered innovation and strategically targeted aerospace initiatives. Might not have flown well. Here's a version of a Rotary Club vision. We'll continue its legacy of community service, utilizing our influential membership to assist agencies in our community to achieve their missions. Sound like something people would sign up for? It is apparently the mission of many Rotary clubs, in my experience. Reverse engineering. How about our Rotary Club will be the growing, effective, vibrant force in our community, making it a better place to live? Or how about the RI mission statement? Together, we see a world where our people unite and take action to create lasting change across the globe, in our communities, and in ourselves. That's pretty well crafted. You may need, as district membership chairs, to help your club membership chairs help their presidents come up with a vision that their clubs can buy into. So at this point, what we typically invite people to do is write a vision for their club in this worksheet. We typically tell them the answers are in the back of the book. You're welcome to any of these vision statements or do your own thing. When we talk about communication, this is some math that Cotter did for us. It says that the total amount of communication going to an employee in a 3-month window is about 2.3 million words or numbers. And the typical communication of a change vision is about 0.5% of that bandwidth. 0.5%. You cannot believe what it takes to communicate across a broad audience. Whatever your plan is for communicating about membership as a DMC, step it up by about a factor of 10 and it'll be about right. But here's a little mnemonic for building that communication plan. Start with S, situation. Just explain the current facts. Then we go to P, problem. The problem with that is what? Now remember, we're talking about they don't get it, they don't care, they don't know how. This aligns directly with that. Implication. If something doesn't change, here's where we're headed. And the need. Here's what we need to be doing. So here's how that would look in a club. Situation is our club's been on a steady downward trend, losing an average of 2 members a year for the past 5 years. The problem with that is the clubs learned to accept membership decline as a natural occurrence. They have created a culture of decline. Has forgotten that growth, not attrition, is our goal. Implication, if we stay on this track, we're going to find ourselves in steadily smaller meetings, potential members asking, is this really something I want to be part of? And when we lose that ability to attract members, it's only a matter of time until we all age out together and the club goes out of business. Look at your clubs in your red zone of your MGI. I think this is a fairly credible prediction that those clubs are simply aging out together and they're on their way to becoming the last generation of Rotarians in their town. And then the need. We need to help the members understand that growing the club is essential to our survival. Understand that attracting more members is in everyone's best interest, including the new members. And provide a compelling vision of a growing, vibrant club and inspire them to make it that way. SPIN, situation, problem, implication, and need. Now, I don't ever ask an audience to do anything I wouldn't do. Anytime I get into any significant communication challenge, even with my wife, I take out a blank sheet of paper, and on the left-hand side, I write S, P, I, and N, and then just start writing the bullet points. It'll work every time. Situation, problem, implication, need. It is so dirt simple, but it will help you build a framework of a compelling message that will sell to pretty much any audience. Then, of course, in a workshop session, we invite people to take their vision and then write the spin script for it. This slide set's available, this worksheet's available. I'm available to help if you think this is something. I believe as governor, which is where this was first used in 2015, I believe as governor, my main challenge in District 7750 was leadership development and particularly change leadership. That's where we introduced this vocabulary and this exercise. And I'm convinced today that across Rotary globally, if we could just get some change management skill sets built among our leadership. This is not a talent, this is a skill set. This is like riding a bicycle. This is like pretty much any physical or mental or academic skill. People learn to do this stuff. It doesn't come naturally. Letting obstacles get in the way. Namely, elder naysayers, those are the typicals. Now, I was talking about this with a thing. This was an incoming governor candidate in another district. And she said, you know, I've got this guy that's just getting in my way. And, you know, he's basically just not willing to come along with much of anything. I said, you got to figure out a way to neutralize that. If you have an elder naysayer who is willing to put energy into getting into your way, you've got to figure out a way to neutralize that. I would probably start with a breakfast, lunch, or beverage after work and sit down with him and say, you know, we've talked about this, I proposed this, you've opposed it. What do you see as the downside of this strategy? And just let him talk. Just try to draw him out in the open, try to figure out what it is he has a problem with, because what she was talking about doing was basically membership events, Discover Rotary type events, and this guy just had some sort of deep-seated objection, but you couldn't connect the dots between his objection and what she was trying to do. So there was something else back in the back of his head. Some other story was playing in the back of his head about why that was a bad idea. But he hadn't been willing to share that with anybody. He simply used his seniority and position power in the club to block her efforts. So if you've got to change leadership, active pushback, you've got to figure out a way at least to neutralize that force. And then equipping members to act. The way you do that is by communicating a sensible vision, providing the training. They don't know how. Once we get past, they don't get it and they don't care, then we may need to provide some training. And as I mentioned, it is okay to confront a member who's undercutting your vision. Keeping in mind as leaders, our responsibility is to the mission, not the individuals. Our responsibility is to the mission, not the individuals. If there is somebody that is, sorry to say, anybody ever been in a toxic workplace? There are toxic Rotarians. And frankly, folks, Rotary is better off without a toxic Rotarian. Replace that with somebody that is on board with a whole different story. And then this idea of short-term wins, this idea of literally setting up some things that we know we can do. Now, that was part of the space program, although it was also part of the advancing engineering experiment. Shooting Alan Shepard up in the air, not even going into orbit, splashing down a capsule. As you remember, we lost that capsule and almost lost that astronaut when the flotation collar failed. Learned some things that day. But seriously, just those short-term wins. John Glenn on the radio, orbiting around the Earth, that sold the American public on the idea we could really actually do this. So the success principles are these. The the 6 I've described on the screen in your workbook. And I regularly remind folks of these. People will call me and say, I'm having this trouble. I said, go back to your Cotter success principles and play that down from the top. Because that is what's getting in your way, is change leadership failure, and here are the antidotes for that. Any questions? Anybody? Anybody had some experience with these? I know that we're not all first timers here. This is not the first time some of you all have seen this. Anybody had a success story with helping a club through some of these change management issues? John?
I'm actually going through some of that right now with one of our clubs. It's actually the club I joined, Rotary. I've since transferred to another club, but they're struggling. It's again one of those clubs that's a lunchtime club, but no one in the club actually works in the area where the club meets. They all work elsewhere back. So we're trying to get them to understand that a change of the meeting time might be to their benefit. And if again, we just went right through the whole process there, explain to them, and with the spin model, this is where you are, this is the problem with that, this is what it's going to mean to you, and here's what you need to do. And it fit right in with all this. But one of the big ones was that obstacle and the older naysayer.
Mm-hmm.
It took about 3 different meetings with the one guy who was the most negative about the whole thing before he finally came around and began to understand what was going to happen. The first was just listening, find out why did we feel that way. The second was, okay, now I understand that. Let me explain to you, and again, use the spin, here's what's happening. And the third one was, do you get it now? And he came on board. So that,
Yeah.
they haven't done it yet.
I just want to pick up and kind of add to your story. And with clubs, I've had 3 or 4 where the president is meeting that opposition. In addition to an approach that you outlined, I always advise presidents or whoever that they need to additionally continue to build that coalition within the club that is committed to change. Because at some point, that naysayer, you want to make sure that they are in the minority. So to go to them too early allows them to create more consternation in the club. And eventually, it's kind of like, well, you got to catch up. I can't hear that objection anymore. And then they have to, capitulate. And if it's continuing to be reticent, especially in the corporate world, we just ultimately say, hey, the train is going south. Now, you can go northwest or east, but you cannot go on this train in those directions.
Not on this train.
Terry, one of the other things that happened in that too, with building the county coalition, it wasn't as much like a whole big coalition because the club's so small. You can take a whole big coalition, but I did go to one of the other members that was one of the founding members of that club and talked to him, and then he understood right off, and he actually invited me back in to one of their meetings, like a Zoom.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Talk about that helped because he did the introduction. I got Johnny here to talk about this, and this is why I think it's important. We really have to do something.
Now, as club coaches, district membership chairs, you get a club that you get a window of opportunity like what Johnny's talking about, and you get somebody persuaded, maybe we need to do some intentional things such as club information hours, discover Rotary. The next thing you can suggest to that membership chair while you're still on the phone is, and here's the way you might want to go about that, and then describe getting 2 or 3 people on board before he tosses it out in front of the board with nobody ever having heard it before. Japanese companies do not have this problem. Japanese company board meetings are really, really boring because everything's all been figured out all way before that around the water cooler or at the bar or whatever, and it's just an up-down vote by the time it actually gets to the table. They don't debate anything. at a meeting. They've got a better way to get that done. It's entirely through getting people together off scene. Thank you. I believe it's time for a break.
You are right on it, sir. You're